Okay guys, we're out here in Waimanalo at the Go Farm site at the UH Research Station. Once you've got your site picked of where you're going to do your growing, whether that's in a container, a raised bed, or in the ground, you're going to want to get your seeds started. So some seeds you're going to start right in the ground. A lot of stuff you're going to actually start in the nursery first. So that's what we're going to be talking about here right now. Is starting seeds in the nursery. So these are kale plants that I started probably 3 weeks or so ago. They were like those little babies in the 72 cell trays, and then we stepped them up into these 3-inch pots. And we like to do that so that then when we transplant these into the ground, we know they've got a head start on weeds, a head start on slugs and snails. But we want to get them out of those cells before they start to get nutrient stressed or root bound. And same thing with the ones here. This one's, starting to get some nice size on it. I'm gonna check this. You can see the roots are really starting to fill up the pot. So pretty soon this thing's gonna run out of space to grow. It's gonna run out of nutrients. So we wanna get this in the ground really in the next couple days. And the one thing that's really nice to do for these guys right before putting them into the ground is giving them a nice deep water. So you're transplanting this in with a really wet root ball. And sometimes right before we plant them, like the day before or even the same day, we'll give them a drench with the fish emulsion or another kind of liquid fertilizer so they go into the ground with a little bit of a boost. All right, guys, so again, once we've picked our spot that we're gonna grow, whether that's in a container, in a raised bed where you're making the walls like we've seen at Leeward Community College, in a container like we've seen at IHS, or here in the ground like in Waimanalo, it's time to add some ingredients and get our growing area ready. So in this case, we're going right into soil. If you're doing this into a container or a raised bed, you might be putting in there some different potting mixes or soils that you're buying at the nursery, whereas we're just going to work with the soil that's actually here and then add some of our amendments. If you become an avid gardener, you might want to consider ordering something like this. This is called a broad fork. And basically this is just a really beefy version of our garden fork, and this is just gonna allow you to basically take the ground that you're working with, get on here, get these tines down as deep as you feel like jumping around here for a while, and then you're gonna kind of pry, and that's just gonna open up the area that's going to allow for deeper root penetration, better airflow, more water. So this is just to loosen up, a real hard area. Another way that people will do that is called double digging, and that's where you're going to basically try to do the same effect with the shovel. Just get down as deep as you can, kind of flip the soil over, and then sometimes people will then even go a second shovel deep, really trying to loosen up the soil. And again, depending on where you're growing, this may or may not be as important. If you're in sandy soil, maybe not as important. And then you'd come here, get that first shovel load, put it back in that ditch. And so you're just, basically trying to get two shovel depths deep, getting the soil loose. Because most of our annual vegetables that we're growing like loose, fluffy soil that's easy for their roots to move through. The soil is going to stay well aerated. You could do a similar kind of thing with the fork, just coming through and trying to loosen the soil up. This is a bit harder. Your work's going to be more for you if you're starting with an area like this where you're just going into bare sod. You're going to do similar kind of work with the shovel and want to really stay on top of letting the grass die back. Another option would be to tarp it with some plastic to try to kill the grass, or as we've done here, this area was previously tilled, so you could rent a tiller or find someone who has a tiller to come kind of do like the primary work for you, and then you'd be continuing on with hand tools. So regardless, again, if this is in the ground, in containers, or in a raised bed, we've got our sort of base soil, and so now what we need to add is our compost. So regardless, you're going to put down your compost. There is too much of a good thing, especially if some of this compost, you can see there's still like a lot of wood chunks in here. So this still has a lot of carbon. So this is going to be breaking down, and it's going to take some of the nutrients, especially the nitrogen, away from our plants if we put too much. So what we like to do is prepare our bed a week, sometimes even 2 weeks, or our containers before we're planting, so that this has time to kind of start breaking down. So sometimes people will say you want to put, an inch or 2 inches of compost. So we're going to put this kind of layer of compost here. So this is providing some, just general nutrients and then all those other benefits that I noted. Then we need to put something especially for our nitrogen. Again, we like to get this in the ground and give it a week or two to start breaking down before planting into it. If you put too much of this down and then plant your baby plants into it, you can definitely end up burning the roots and injuring or killing your plants. So it's great to think ahead. Another thing that you could use, and we'll use sometimes, this is called sustain. So I'm gonna just eyeball it for the sake of this. We're gonna put down some of the tankage, and again, this is for our nitrogen source, and so we're wanting to get this evenly spread so that it's available for plant roots all over our planting area eventually. So we've got our nutrient source down here. If you can't find either of these, you might go to the co-allow farmers and get a manure, or you might end up just getting a more synthetic fertilizer that's maybe like 10-10-10 or 20-05, and follow the directions on there that are telling you how much to put. Regardless, you're going to go ahead and sprinkle that with your compost. And now that we've got that down, we want to get that mixed in a bit. So I would come back here, just kind of give it a little bit of a once over to get that stuff under the ground so that it's going to stay moist and is able to get start breaking down so that birds and mongoose and pets and kids aren't messing with it. Then this might be the time where you want to come with your fork, or sorry, your rake, thank you, and shape your bed. So depending on where you're growing, you're gonna make your beds different shapes. We like to make raised beds so that when it rains really heavily, the water is gonna stay down in the paths. Kind of try to flatten this out. You're gonna wanna make these beds basically the width that you're able to reach out part way comfortably. You don't want to have such a big bed that you're not able to reach out into your bed. So now we would let this sit for a couple of weeks. You could let it sit open. You might want to water it some, or if it's raining, that's great. That's going to let everything in here start to break down. And then in a couple weeks, it'll be ready either to put your seeds, if you're doing direct seeding of things like beans or corn or maybe squash, you can just plant those right into the ground, or to put your transplants into the ground like tomatoes, kales, lettuces, and you're going to plant that right into the ground here. So we'll cover that next, and this will have a couple weeks to break down in the meantime. Okay guys, we're back here in Waimanalo. It's been a couple of weeks. We're gonna pretend our bed's been breaking down here. If it's wet enough, you actually might start to see some weeds germinating, and that's a great time to come through. A rake would be an option, using your shovel coming through like this, or some different weeding hand tools. that we'll cover later. But basically, if you've got your first set of weeds coming up here and you have nothing planted yet, this is a great time to go ahead and kill all those little baby weeds before you're either putting your seeds into the ground or your transplants, so that you've got a relatively clean slate. And a lot of times the weeds that are going to come up are going to be the ones closest to the surface. And once you get rid of those, you're going to have fewer weed problems, because a lot of the other weed seeds are still hiding down deeper and they're not going to germinate yet. So we're going to say we've got this bed ready, or this container, or our raised bed. We've taken care of all the little baby weeds, and now it's time to transplant. So we've got a nice healthy looking transplant here. We can see that we're getting we've got a nice root formation here, but it's not getting to a point of being stressed and really root bound. If it were really root bound, sometimes you'll want to kind of loosen it up a little bit just to encourage the roots to know you can start growing in other directions. So then basically what we're going to try to do is to get this entire root ball into the ground. So we're going to, either using my hand or a garden trowel, make this hole at least as big so that this entire thing can be under the ground. What we don't want to have is this thing sticking up above the ground, because this is going to make this thing more prone to break. This is going to start to dry out. So we're going to get a nice deep hole, get that down into the hole, and then come back and give that a nice covering so that the whole plant is really nicely kind of supported by the soil. We're going to bring some soil around it. I don't really recommend like patting this down, because that's going to maybe compact the soil. So that's nice and in place, and then we're going to come give this a nice watering. So we're going to get some nice soil to soil contact. What we don't want are like air pockets in there where those roots are trying to grow and they're just hitting air. So we're going to give this a nice deep watering for the first couple days and get this plant acclimated to its new place out here in the big wild world, whether that's on your lanai or in the field. That's a new place. It's been coming out of the nursery and is out in the real world now. And sometimes you can have what's called transplant shock, where there's a few days where it's kind of confused. Where am I? What's going on? And this is really the crucial time to make sure that you're keeping it well watered enough. You don't want to drown it. That's going to be detrimental too. And then hopefully, if things are going well, you're going to see, all right, it's taken hold, and you're going to start to see some vigorous growth. And that's when you know success is on the horizon, if you keep the bugs away. All right, guys, we're back out here. We're going to talk about doing some direct seeding. So we did our transplant here, but there are other crops. Beans are a great example. Corn, whether it's a sweet corn or a field corn. Those are two things that we love to direct seed. Beets, salad mixes, arugula, carrots, radishes, daikon, things like those. So the way that we typically do that, we've prepared our growing area in the same way as anything else. And then you're going to come through and you're going to make a furrow. So you're just going to try to like make a line in the soil that you're going to know, okay, that's where I'm putting my seeds. We could pretend we're going to put another line right here. That'd be getting pretty close for corn. And then you're going to come through here, and it's going to depend on what the spacing is for your seed. And so most of the time, your seed pack is going to tell you your spacing. So here it's telling me the plant spacing after thinning is 1 foot. Versus, with our beets or salad greens, that may be maybe more like every inch. So in this case, maybe these are big seeds, so I might just grab the seeds. I'm gonna put them in here, maybe 2 every foot, then I can thin them later on. If this was something I was wanting to sow more thickly, I could just be sprinkling it along here. This is what it might look like if I were doing bush beans. So then we've got our seeds down. And then I'm gonna come back through here and fill this trench in. And remember, again, our seeds we wanna basically have in the ground 2 times the depth of their size. So these can get down there, you know, relatively deeply, the corn. I'm gonna fill these furrows in, make sure that the seeds are covered so that nobody's gonna eat them. And then again, I'm gonna come through, give these guys a nice deep watering, making sure that the seed's getting nice contact with the soil, soaking up that moisture, which is gonna give it the signal time to germinate. Again, you're gonna wanna keep your eyes on that for the first few days, keeping it nice and moist. Some of you guys, depending on where you're growing, might run into problems with birds pulling your seedlings out, and you can look for things like bird scare tape, little pinwheels, and bird netting at different garden supply stores to help you counter that problem, or get your cat out in the garden to help out. All right, good luck. Mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check.